Hello and welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, well, let's go ahead and kick things off. Hello everyone and welcome to today's Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center webinar, also co-presented by the National Center for Safe Routes to School. My name is Dan Jeline. I'm excited to host and help moderate this session today, where we'll be talking about school zones and how we can improve road user safety in school zones, as well as the community around school zones and more broadly citywide or jurisdiction-wide. So we're excited for you to join us today with our panelists to talk about this issue. I would like to first introduce you to our panelists, the folks you'll be hearing from today. First up will be Nancy Pullen-Sufert, who is the director of National Center for Safe Routes to School. Nancy is also part of the PBIC, Pedestrian Bicycle Information Center, with both of these centers based at the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. Nancy brings 25 years of injury prevention experience, with 20 of those years having a strong focus on youth active travel. Christine Baker is also with us today. Christine is the Vision Zero program manager in Arlington County, Virginia. Christine led the launch of Arlington's Vision Zero program in 2019 and has since been managing Vision Zero implementation through safety data analysis, planning, policy changes, and projects for the county. We're also joined by Tobin Bennett Gold, who has over 10 years of experience in public sector traffic engineering across city, county, and state agencies, and has served as the city traffic engineer for the city of Kenmore, Washington since 2018. He's passionate about traffic safety in multimodal environments and in developing rigorous data-driven processes to support transportation agencies in doing the most good with finite resources. Unfortunately, we had a last-minute scheduling conflict with our panelists from the city of Minneapolis, so unfortunately, they won't be able to join us today. But we do have a great panel lined up and a really healthy amount of time for discussion at the end, where we're going to be able to respond to each of your questions. So keep those coming in as we go along. I just want to cover a bit of housekeeping before we get into our presentations today. As I mentioned, you can submit questions to us anytime as well as comments, and we'll do our best to respond to those quickly or incorporate them into our final discussion period. We've already posted the archive of today's webinar in terms of the slides. I'll send you that link in a moment. We are recording this webinar today and we'll post that link to the same page by tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll be getting an email from me with a lot of information, such as a link to the archive page, as well as instructions for obtaining a certificate of attendance for the webinar. We'll be asking you to answer a few follow-up questions after the webinar today in order to get that certificate of attendance. And as always, we encourage you to review previous episodes of our webinars at pedbikeinfo.org/webinars and keep an eye out for upcoming episodes as they're scheduled. So with that, I would like to go ahead and get into our presentations, and we'll start first with Nancy Pullen-Sufert, who will kick us off.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Dan. Just going to move over to my screen here. Great. Can you see my screen now, Dan?
I can't see it yet, Nancy. Maybe try that one more time.
Okay. Better?
Here we go. There it is. Great.
Okay, wonderful. So, hi, everyone. Hi. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. It is a pleasure to be with you all, and particularly a pleasure to be speaking alongside Christine Baker and Tobin Bennett Smith, who are doing amazing work that I admire very much. So my job today is really just to set a little bit of kind of broad thinking and a broad perspective, and then Christine and Tobin really will dig into their expertise at the city level. So, based on the fact that you have come to this webinar, I'm going to assume that you are curious about what's happening in school zones and maybe how that relates to community-wide safety strategies, which is also what we're all excited about. So I was at a National Walk and Roll to School Day event earlier this month, and it really reminded me of the valuable opportunity for those of us who care about road safety that we have when we improve safety in school zones. So the school that I was at had kids and families arriving on bike and on foot and by school bus and private vehicle. There was a whole lot happening. With a lot of people coming and caregivers and school buses leaving again. So this school had school zone flashers, signage, markings, but it also had several crossing improvements and traffic calming tools at play, sort of leading up to and through the school zone. So what I really think about is the fact that starting in school zones, these like well-defined areas in our communities where many people converge in a very short period of time, this is a really important place for pedestrian safety. It's also just the convergence point, right? The network that students and families use and that they share with other road users extends far beyond just the school zone. This makes school zones really important opportunities for change and really important for us to be thinking about how that change can be leveraged beyond the school zone. So first, what evidence do we have that communities care about kids walking and biking to school? You heard me mention National Walk and Roll to School Day a minute ago, so I like to start with that as one of a big piece of evidence. National Walk and Roll to School Day has been happening since 1997, and it really has become a tradition for many communities. It has a companion event that takes place in the spring, National Bike and Roll to School Day, and we see thousands of communities that participate. For those of you who aren't familiar with either of these events, I also just want to say that there's kind of an opportunity here too. So we do a post-event survey and ask communities about why they participate in these events. So here you can see the kinds of responses that we've gotten over time. So pedestrian safety is in gray, and it is in 2024, it was the second most common reason that organizers tell us that that their community participates in the event. But it is not the only reason. You know, as you can see, there are sort of a variety of reasons why communities care. And for those of you who don't always think about school travel and working with families, I just want you to keep this in mind that there really are a variety of reasons that we can use to help set the tone for why we care about school zones, why we care about youth active travel. And when we think about, yeah, really how we frame the value of slowing speeds in school zones and how that fits with this broader set of things that communities care about around really creating, you know, connected social places where people can be active and be together. Another piece of evidence that I like to add is SS4A awards. So we had a research assistant, Rachel Auerbach, who went back and looked at, just did like a simple keyword search of SS4A awards over the last 3 years and really saw, you know, a small but significant increase in the number of awards that mention a youth in the context of walking and biking. So right now, we see a lot of variation in school zone speed limits around the country and sort of how they are handled. Minnesota Department of Transportation conducted a review of speed limit policies. So I just pulled this table directly out of one of their reports because it does such a nice job of capturing the variation in speeds and whether there is a specific set speed or whether it is more, there's some variability depending on context. And I think that this is sort of important level setting as we think about, you know, what does it look like for road users as they travel around it? And what's our opportunity to do things differently than however our respective states might be doing it now? I also just want to say that thinking about school zones and leveraging them for change is like not a uniquely American trait. This year, we presented our Vision Zero for Youth International Leadership Award to the city of Hanoi, Vietnam, where really the foundation of the work that they have been doing around schools really began with a safe school zone guide that was adopted nationwide to recommend school zone standards across the country. And in 2024, we presented an award to Moldova. And Moldova, as well, had a focus very strongly on traffic calming and beyond school zones, an emphasis on 30 kilometers per hour, which is about 20 miles per hour. And that speed limit was adopted nationwide around schools and pedestrian concentrated areas. But it really started with this focus on children and focus on travel to school. I included a quote here from Tatiana Mihalova, who's the executive director of the Automobile Club of Moldova. I thought, she captured it really well when she said, the work that they do and the focus on slowing speeds is about community. And if you say to the public, like, we should slow speeds to 30 kilometers per hour, people say it's too slow. But when you ask if they want a safer zone for children, they say yes. And that's really part of the opportunity that we have here. And now I want to kind of zoom out for a second and just talk more broadly about needs of children and how we think about that. So starting where youth walk and bike and starting around schools is not a new strategy, but it does require that we think a little bit about road users and about the issues that they encounter. So when we're thinking about how to plan for the needs of youth, of course, first we want to think about collecting data to help us understand where students are going, where do they live, what are those routes that they're taking to school, where do they go after the school day is over. And there are a variety of data collection methods that communities use. I highlighted here just a couple. One is web-based and very easy, simple to use, and also simple for communities to benchmark their walking and biking rates, among others. That's bikewalkroll.org, or doing simple observational counts, using student travel tallies, parent surveys, those kinds of methods, and also capturing information about what students say their concerns are. And we're seeing, a growing number of apps that are available to be able to engage young people, to have them mark places that are particularly of concern. And of course, in keeping with a safe system approach, taking a proactive look at crash risk can really help inform kind of prioritizing which places need improvements first. We had the opportunity to work with the city of Philadelphia about 4 years ago to use this process. So we focused on looking at vehicle volume, looking at posted speeds, number of lanes, and then crash history around schools. And what that resulted in was a prioritized list of road segments and intersections that had the greatest risk for children. And one of our takeaways from that is that that list was different than if you looked at crashes and risk for all ages of people. So taking a youth specific approach, looking specifically at youth travel patterns and risk is really important. Another piece is thinking about how are we engaging communities and really thinking about the fact that young people are community members. And so they need to be engaged and sort of thought of as such. And we did a scan looking across the country to understand how are cities engaging young people. And in some instances, that was very broad. So we were seeing high school students who were included as representatives on city committees, whether it was a multimodal committee or a park committee. We saw 100% youth advisory councils that were being used, like a mayor's advisory council, to be able to give recommendations to cities that were youth focused and youth centered. And then we also see communities that are including young people in quick build projects, both in sort of the design of them, sometimes in the implementation and construction of them. I included some examples here, one from Detroit, one from Honolulu. Really exciting work that's happening. I also included our URL below that just gives more examples about how cities are really thinking about engaging youth. So we also think about including high school students, and high school students with disabilities are a particularly unique population to think about. This is a group that is less likely to get driver licenses and therefore more likely to be using public transit, be getting around, walking and biking. In high school and during kind of a transition programs, students with disabilities are thinking about what is going to be next for them and how they'll be traveling around their communities. So for a lot of these students, they are traveling between a school setting and work sites to practice job skills and to build independence. So we have had the opportunity to learn from communities who are doing some of this really good work. We've developed a couple different guides, one called Creating Connections that really talks about Safe Routes to School programs. And special education programs working together. More recently, we've developed the student-centered walk audits that gives a lot of ideas for how to include and partner with high school students with disabilities so that their voice is included in identifying problems and solutions around walking routes. And then I am sorry that our representative from City of Minneapolis isn't here. They have done some really unique things as well. So I want to shout out to them and to City of St. Paul for engaging high school students with disabilities, particularly around walk audits and asking them about their experience around using streets. So, bringing it back to thinking about children and youth in general and the unique population that they are. So, children do have cognitive and physical abilities that are different from adults. And many of these things that here you kind of see in this blue box are just a virtue of growing up, and they're not necessarily elements that are changeable. But this whole orange side suggests areas where we can make change. And I want to note that poor infrastructure is one of those things. So when we think about children, we know that having physical separation between modes, so having separated space where students are walking and biking that is separated from where people are driving, is really important. We know that having shortened crossing distances is important. Slow traffic speeds, of course, and then good visibility. So you see a little line drawing here that sort of highlights the differences in visibility with a curb extension as well as with some daylighting where that parking space is pulled back away from the crossing. So cities are thinking about applying these kinds of things and lots of other things in really systemic ways around school zones. So I want to kind of just note some of those places that we know about, and I'm sure there are many more that I would love to learn from our audience about as well. But I think about both Fremont, California and Seattle, Washington, that have made very deliberate efforts that they have touted around making improvements around all of their schools, all of their city schools. This past spring, the city of San Francisco kicked off a very large daylighting initiative, and they kicked it off by starting in school zones and starting with daylighting crosswalks in school zones. So that's a great example about how, an initiative that is going to be much broader really starts around schools. And then we also see examples of places that have focused on school zones and then really looked at, well, how can we extend some of those policies and practices beyond the zone. So Lincoln, Nebraska, and their school zone standards. Arlington, you're going to hear from Christine in a little bit about some of the work that they've done in that vein. So another example is around school streets, of course. This example, again, from Seattle, we're seeing DOTs that are working with schools and communities to establish school streets. So that's a segment of roadway bordering a school where motor vehicle traffic is limited to local access, and really a priority for pedestrians and bicyclists becomes very clear. So that's a very different way of thinking about and treating an area around a school. So also just want to mention a little bit more around quick build projects. We've had the opportunity through some funding from General Motors to be able to work with about 8 different cities now around the country to do quick build projects to help support safety for students walking and biking, addressing urgent safety needs. This example you see here is from the city of Cincinnati. They had a school that has about 500 of its students that go to an aftercare program that involve those students crossing a a roadway called Lynn Street that is part of identified as a high crash corridor within the city. And so the city had very large capital improvements planned, but they also knew that they wanted to make changes kind of urgently. So using some low cost changes around daylighting and removing a parking space, and then simple curb extensions. So very low cost things that they put into place very quickly. And they were able to see some modest reductions in their speeds just from those kinds of changes. So, City of Atlanta is another example of a place that has thoughtfully used quick build projects, quick build countermeasures around a school. This one is a middle school. The city used up part of the travel lane to be able to create a walk bike lane so that students had more space for walking and biking. They also improved the crossing over to the school. So when we asked the city of Atlanta a little bit about their experience with this quick build project and the benefits that they saw from it, something interesting that we learned from them was really how they leveraged it in order to get more money for projects and how it really built interest among their city council. I was just talking to City of Atlanta Safe Routes to School coordinator Nicole Hollis last week. She told me that that particular quick build improvement, the walk bike lane, has been extended even further thanks to more funding from council. So this is really again a way that we can now engage and think about elected officials and in getting interested and having talking points around slowing traffic speeds throughout communities and starting with a focus on young people. If you are interested in reading more about either of those examples, we have written case studies about both of them. So finally, I'll just mention that if you are new to thinking about school zones and the needs of children, this really does open up kind of new partners to pull into your broader safety work. People come to this work really from a variety of priorities. So I wanted to list some ones here that you may or may not be familiar with, but for communities that have schools that are really prioritizing school attendance, walking and biking to school and creating options for that, walking school bus programs for that is a really important angle to be able to meet them with in terms of messaging. Schools have a lot of challenges presented when they have a lot of motor vehicle congestion from pickup and drop off, and the amount of time that it takes from school staff to be able to assist with pickup and drop off. So there are kind of just a variety of perspectives that can be brought to bear when we think about safety for students, but again, and then being able to carry along some of those partners with us when we think more broadly about safety for all road users, kind of beyond the school zone. A few shameless plugs before I wrap up. Walk and Roll to School Day registration is open until the end of the month. So if your community celebrated Walk to School Day and it hasn't registered yet, please encourage them to do so at walkbiketoschool.org. Also want to be sure that you know that we have a list of state Safe Routes to School contacts on the PBIC website, pedbikeinfo.org. And I mentioned a little bit about our Vision Zero for Youth Leadership Awards. I mentioned some international examples. We have a U.S. award that we present, and Arlington, Virginia, where Christine is from, is one of our award recipients. And we are opening up our call for applications in the next couple days. So please watch for that at visionzeroforyouth.org. All communities are eligible to apply for that. And finally, just want to acknowledge I couldn't do this work without learning from lots of committed, caring people and the work that they do in their communities, as well as my colleagues at the National Center for Safe Routes to School. And we really can't do that work without the support that we get from General Motors, FIA Foundation, Federal Highway Administration. So special thank you to all of those sponsors as well. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Let's keep the momentum going, and we'll hear from Christine in Arlington County, Virginia. Just a reminder to keep your questions coming in. We've got a nice discussion period planned for later, so we'll handle them at that point.
Thanks, Dan. How do the slides look?
Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you. So I am Christine Baker. I'm from Arlington County, Virginia. And if you're not familiar with Arlington, we are just southwest of Washington, D.C. We've got about 2,400 people in the county, and we also have about 220,000 jobs. And we are right on the metro line. So we have a very rich transit community, as well as lots of other transportation options like Capital Bike Share. We've got a lot of e-scooters and e-bikes, lots of ped bike activity. So no shortage of transportation options in our 26 square miles. So I'm here today, thank you for having me, by the way, to talk about Arlington's school zone journey. So I'll talk a little bit about how we develop school zone guidelines, how we then use those guidelines to retrofit and update all of our school zones, and then talk about kind of what the data and the engagement findings were as we deployed those over the course of about 4 years, as well as lessons learned and how it paved the way for more for us. So why did we develop school zone guidelines? It was actually something that came out of our Vision Zero action plan. And the reason we put it in the action plan was because right leading up to that point in time, we had about 5 new schools come online. And as we started to think about how to set and establish the school zones around those schools, we realized we didn't really have a strong guideline. All the schools in the county looked a little bit different. The school zones looked different. The way we used beacons looked different. And it all, had reflection and kind of at what point in time that school was established. So it really opened our eyes as to the need for this. And just kind of thinking about, typical standards for signs, crosswalks, pavement markings, other things that happen within that 700 feet of the school access points, as well as kind of how do we incorporate 20-mile-per-hour all day, every day slow zones. And that was kind of where the guidelines, kind of transitioned how we approach school zones. We established 20-mile-per-hour speed limits on all the neighborhood roads that were applicable all day, every day, and then had the dynamic flashing beacons only on our arterials. And this kind of guidelines, this standardization helps set the stage for us to do things in the future, like reintroducing speed humps in our county, launching our speed safety camera program in 2024, and creating prioritization criteria, which I'll talk about at the end of the presentation. But in terms of kind of how we did it, it is not a hard sell. This reminded me the quote Nancy shared. When you frame it as, a safe space for kids, people getting to and from school, it's not a hard sell. We framed it as, 1 in 4 crashes in Arlington involve speeding. The risk of injuries and deaths increases as vehicle speed increases. And children are still learning how to travel safely. Their frontal lobes are still developing. They're not going to make the perfect choices. So we need to make sure that our cars are going slowly around them to be able to respond quickly. So we also started with the school zone retrofits and kind of launching the guidelines in real life as demonstration projects. So we started with just 13 schools in 2022, and we tested those guidelines before we said, we're doing it everywhere. And that way people responded a little, better as well, because they didn't feel like, this is how it's going to be. It allows us to test it. kind of figure out what the strengths were and if there was anything we needed to change before we did it whole scale. So the guidelines specify various things. As I mentioned, we designate speed limits with flashing beacons on arterials. And then we have the school zone speed limit signs on local roads. And we went with 20 pretty much as a blanket. We do have one VDOT road on a higher speed. I think that was 25 miles per hour, but there was only one in the whole county. So 20 mile per hour is kind of where our speed limit sat on that chart that Nancy showed. And then, we have standards for school end zone signs, school crossing signs, when they have the different placards on them, as well as slow school crossing markings on uncontrolled crossings over arterials, high visibility crosswalks on every crosswalk within the school zone, and then other pavement markings like school zone written on some of the arterial streets where we have really high volumes, or 20 mile per hour speed limit markings on neighborhood roads where someone's transitioning from a higher speed road into the neighborhood to kind of reinforce what's already on the signage. So this is kind of all the different things that we built our school zone guidelines around. And the process to update this was really fun. And like I said, we did it over the course of about 3 to 4 years. So what worked well for us was batching school zones. We did about 10 to 15 at a time. And that kept the workload manageable, which was really important for us, because if you try to do it all at once, it's too much to take in. So we batched them. And as I said, we did demonstration zones to start. And then from there, we did a public engagement, and then we kind of rolled out the next batch by batch to finally get all of the 44 plus schools in Arlington. But kind of going back to the process, we batched schools. And then we met with each school. And I thought that was super important because we talked with the person who was most, in tune with the transportation options at that school, the people who are out in the morning directing parents, and just talked about, where are people coming from? What are your key access points? And that made sure that our 750-foot, kind of range met the right roads, was capturing the right streets where kids were coming from, and also took into account any crossings that might have been outside that boundary, but still needed some kind of school zone because of the high volumes of kids who are crossing the street. So those conversations helped us to build relationships and trust with each school, as well as give us a point of contact who we could reach out to if anything ever comes up in that school area, and just ground truth everything that we were seeing in our kind of engineering brain assessment. Then we conducted walkthroughs of each school. So we wanted to see, number one, what's out there, and number two, kind of, is there anything else that we should be considering here? And that allowed us to flag additional safety needs. Like if there was a quick build project, if there were curbs that we could easily extend, if there was a, tactical design we can incorporate to add a median, or anything else to help improve sight lines, or, quick build things that we could get out to help make things, safer in the school zone. So it kind of killed two birds with one stone. We got out, we took inventory, we figured out what we wanted to add, and then allowed us to see if there's anything else we could do on top of that with kind of quick, easy, low-cost materials. Then we created signing and marking plans for each school zone, which this was the highest amount of time I think that was spent. And we ended up doing group reviews because we found out that things kind of varied. The interpretation of the guidelines could vary by the reviewer. So we found that if we all sat together as a group and talked through, that was the best way to get through the plans quickly and easily without having to do comment over comment over comment. It was really simple, and we were able to each kind of talk through any of the things that might have been kind of in a gray area to make sure that we all were interpreting the guidelines in the same way. So I thought that was really effective. Then we installed the school zones. We launched a campaign to go with it. We shared that campaign through all of our typical outlets, including newsletters, paid ads through different local organizations. We got earned media, and worked with each school to get the information out to the school families. So we tried to, let people know, hey, these new signs that you're seeing that say 20 mile per hour school, that means all day, every day, as well as kind of what all the other changes were looking like in the beacons. And then finally, we went out and did quality checks, took pictures of all the signs to add into our asset inventory and made sure that things were deployed in the way we had intended. Those quality checks are super important because we found in a couple cases, the signs were pointing the wrong direction and, mistakes happen. So you want to make sure that once those elements all get into the field, that they are looking exactly how you had intended them. So how did it work? We collected speed data in our school slow zones. So that's the 20-mile-per-hour all day, every day areas on our neighborhood streets. We collected data before the school slow zones were installed. Then we collected data again, or before they were installed, then after they were installed, and then a third time once we had installed the pavement markings, these ones right here that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. So this gave us kind of an overall comparison of what happens when you change the speed limit and you add the signs and then you add the pavement markings. And so this light green arrow or light green bar will show you kind of before, the blue is the interim, and then the dark green is after. And you can see most of these do have a downward trend, which is really promising. And the speed pavement markings really help to kind of reiterate what is already on the signage. So it helped to slow people down. But more importantly, we had a significant reduction in high-end speeders. So when you look at the overall distribution, those cars that were going on the higher end really moved down to the lower end. So we saw the number of drivers traveling over 30 miles per hour decrease by almost half, which is really exciting to see with something just done with signs and pavement markings. When we talked to the community about this to get their feedback, we hosted an online feedback forum, like I mentioned, and we advertised it through schools, county outlets. And when we asked, how did you feel before versus after, we saw increases across the board in how people felt before and after the slow zones were installed. And the top things that people kind of gave as feedback were increasing enforcement, improving the signage to be a little more clear. I think at first people weren't totally understanding the 24/7 aspect. And then overall, people just wanted to see it at more schools. So this was from the demonstration, and you can see we then installed these at every single school in the county because the data was showing it was effective as well as the community feedback. So overall, lessons learned, communicate early and often. It was so important to talk to schools, to talk to partners, and just let people know what was happening to make sure that every time we rolled out a new batch, we had a communication campaign that went out, communicated that, linked to something online where people could go to learn more. And that really helped to make it smooth. Working directly with schools was helpful to establish those relationships and connections and ground truth everything that we were seeing in our data and in our engineering analysis. Integrating the quick builds and other improvements was a really great added bonus. You can see the pictures on the right side of the screen. One's of a quick build construction project where there was a great opportunity for a crosswalk, but no receiving ramp. And we were able to, just extend the sidewalk to create a new crossing to school, as well as create a connection to an existing sidewalk. And then below it is a tactical quick build project where we built out the curbs to help improve the sight lines. A lot of parents were actually picking up and dropping off in these areas. So we're able to reserve that space for the sight lines. And we're actually, we did that project a couple years ago. This fall, we're going to build it out. So it kind of gave us something to do in the interim while we kind of programmed that longer term project. Again, meet early and often to quality check, make sure that what you planned gets built. And then collecting data and feedback just helped us build the case. It was a great way to show, hey, this is making a difference. We want to keep doing it. And it built that support in the community. And then last but not least, think about the long game. So how are you going to use the school zone designation within your policies and your guidelines? Because you want to think about that as you're establishing the guidelines so that they are going to set you up for success within those other programs. So one example is in 2023, we reintroduced speed humps in Arlington after a 10-year moratorium. So everyone wanted them everywhere. And we were able to say, hey, we're going to be putting these tactical speed humps. First of all, they're tactical, so they're temporary. We can always take them out as a pilot measure. And we are going to be putting them in our school slow zones where we did not see the speed decrease that we wanted to see, using speed data to understand where our biggest problem areas were. So we were able to deploy speed humps in school zones. We kind of did it in a batch process again. And it reduced instances of drivers going above 20 mile per hour up to 72%. So having that established 20 mile per hour slow zone really helped us to reintroduce speed humps in a way that helped us identify the top need areas. And then in 2024, we launched the county speed safety program. So this kind of was looking on the other side, the arterials where we had our beacons and the speed safety cameras. By law can only be placed in school zones. And the cameras must be placed within view of the beacons so that our police have that for adjudication purposes. So it was very important to know that. We actually wish we had known that when we were doing our guidelines, because it might have changed the way we place beacons to make sure there's right of way for cameras and beacons to be installed. But overall, it's been wonderful to have this program. We've seen a huge reduction in speeds. I don't have the number right now, but we're working on metrics to kind of share the success of that program. And then last but not least, we use school zone designation for weighting criteria for prioritizing things like RFBs and where we build quick builds and capital projects and more. So just knowing how you can use school zones to kind of elevate projects in those areas is really helpful. So you can learn more about school zones in Arlington. We have a whole page dedicated to that process I talked about, and we have a really nice story map that also kind of walks you through. And with that, I'll pass it back to Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's great to learn about all the things y'all are doing in Arlington County, and got a lot of good questions coming too. So stay tuned for those during our discussion period. We have one more presentation. Tobin Bennett Gold will be up next. Tobin, we're ready for your slides whenever you want to cue them up.
Great, yeah, I'll jump into that. So we looking at my first slide right here?
I see him. Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so my name's Tobin Bennett Gold. I'm the city traffic engineer for Kenmore, Washington. One thing I really want everyone to take away from this, Kenmore is a city of 25,000 people, just 60 center lane miles. And I really want anyone who's watching, whether you're elected or staff or a resident, to know that this is something that you can do in your city. So I want to impress upon you, how high impact this tool is, positive and negative, and that's important. And number two, how achievable it is for a city of any size to start a program and affect their school zone and their citywide safety in this way. And I want to jump into it with some motivating examples right now, as they say in the textbooks. Our baseline condition, this is averaged across our school zones where we have photo enforcement active right now. Our baseline condition was that we had 95% of vehicles traveling through the school zone while the school zone flashers are active. We have time of day school zones, 20 mile per hour school zones in Kenmore. 95% of vehicles were traveling 6 or more miles per hour over the speed limit. And the average speed across all of our school zones was 31 miles per hour. That's really high. Our highest average speed, our worst school zone, was 37 miles per hour. And that's just, it's unthinkable to think that we're funneling all these vulnerable road users into an environment like that. Outside of school zone hours, we saw a violation rate of 30%. That's 30% of traffic going 6+ miles per hour. And we had an average speed of 35 miles per hour. This is in an area where our posted regulatory speed limit is 30 miles per hour. After we started school zone enforcement, we saw dramatic reductions in speed from 95% to 1.5% of drivers traveling 6+ miles per hour with the speed limit. Our mean speed dropped by 10 miles per hour. And this is really the difference, especially when I show you the next one. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But this is the difference between having a crash where a school-aged child is almost certainly going to be killed to having a crash where it's very likely to be survivable. We don't want that crash to happen, but we are moving the needle on that crash severity just with putting up photo enforcement for school zones. Outside of our school zone hours, we still saw an improvement. There's no photo enforcement at this stage. We are only enforcing school zone hours, and we saw our regulatory speeding behavior drop from 30% to 20%, and our mean speed dropped to something much closer to the speed limit, 31 miles per hour. After we expanded our program from school zone hours to all hours, so 24/7 all year long, enforcing the 20 mile per hour speed limit and the 30 mile per hour speed limit, we saw a synergy there where our school zone violation rate halved again, and our mean speed dropped to 16 miles per hour. That is exactly where I'd like to see our mean speed in school zones. We have some people traveling faster, some people driving slower. This is the average speed. And we saw our regulatory speeding behavior drop to something very close to what we saw during our school zones in terms of a violation rate. And our mean speed dropped below our speed limit to 25 miles per hour. Still seeing an 85th, hovering right around 30, 31, but just a dramatic improvement in speeding behavior through this enforcement intervention. So I want you to keep that in mind while I talk about this. And why is speed reduction important? I know we're all familiar with this. These right here are my three favorite equations. I don't know if we have any Rune-Elvik fans. These are from the Rune-Elvik meta-study on crash risk associated with speed reduction. And what I want to highlight right here is that we're seeing a 91% reduced risk of fatal crash in school zones. And even with the lesser speed reduction that we're seeing outside of school zone times, we're still seeing a 70% risk in fatal crash, 70% reduction in fatal crash risk. So this is really important, and it's really, we never want that first bad crash to happen in the school zone, and we want to be able to move our crash needle in the school zone, whether the school zone's active or not, and expand that effect citywide. And that's something that we've been able to do because not only do we have a safety effect at the school zone, but the revenue that we generate with that, we're able to invest citywide. So this is not small change. We've been able to spend and earmark money for substantive projects, big projects around the city to improve safety, not just where the cameras are active, but to improve safety for vulnerable road users citywide. So taking that school zone and then leveraging the revenue to invest in areas where we're not using photo enforcement. And one thing that I'm really going to be drilling into is how important public buy-in is. And so we have really leaned into branding our program. Anytime our program is supporting safety investment, whether it's in the school zone or outside the school zone in the rest of the city, we want people to know that that funding is coming from our program. We don't want the only association with our program to be the cameras. We want people to see this program making changes in their community. So we have that CAPE branding right there, and we're really vocal about all the good that this program is doing. Now, that's all a lot of good stuff. We got good safety. We've generated some revenue. We like what we're spending the revenue on. However, that's not all there is to it. The only way you can lose your program is if people feel exploited by your program. And so the currency of having a photo enforcement program is being able to solicit and maintain that public buy-in. Before working in Washington, I worked in Southern Arizona, where I had photo enforcement programs, Pima County, City of Tucson, Crash and Burn in 2014, 2015, grassroots efforts to bring down these programs, voter initiatives, council pressure, ultimately resulting in these programs being removed. There are a lot of things that I learned about how these programs made people feel exploited. In a lot of ways, it was a very fair assessment to see these programs exploitative. They weren't all bad, though. They did a lot of good. We have some of our earliest studies on photo enforcement in the US showing dramatic effect in Arizona. So these programs had real safety value, but Arizona lost permission to have these programs because the communities did not feel served. They felt exploited by these programs. I think Arizona is trying again with photo enforcement right now. I think they have a different approach right now, but there was a lot to learn about what made these programs not successful. And it's not just an Arizona problem, because here in the Puget Sound region, we have had programs fail because of lack of public buy-in. And so that's something that I'm super conscious of when designing our program and administering our program. And one of the ways we do that is we base everything in our program on our foundational values. That CAPE, our Kenmore Automated Photo Enforcement Program, has to be fair, equitable, transparent, and safe. Every decision we make about the program comes back to these foundational values. How can we make this program fair, equitable, transparent, and safe? I have a point here about enforcement areas being conspicuous and not exploitative. That's something that we saw a lot in Arizona. It was a lesson learned. Camera right around the corner, no signing. We have a very thorough standard for application of photo enforcement here. I'm not going to go into detail, but as you drive from the bottom of the page to the top of the page, I want you to note that you're passing an advanced warning sign, photo enforcement ahead. a speed feedback sign with a regulatory photo enforcement sign on it and the speed limit on it, giving you a chance to self-correct. And then when you enter the school zone, you have a school zone with flashers and another regulatory photo enforcement sign. So we want people to have every tool they need to avoid getting a ticket. We're not looking to give out tickets. We're looking to change driver behavior. It's also really important that our program is equitable. We're not looking to have an outsized financial impact. We pay attention to what our fine amount is, who is getting those fines, what are the outcomes of those fines. And we really look at it as a positive that we're also reducing the need for police confrontations with drivers through in-person traffic enforcement, and also reducing the opportunity for bias to enter into policing, because all of this violation review is done without personally identifying information. In Washington, you don't capture the face, you just capture the license plate. So all of this is done just looking at the back of the car and the speed and the video of how they're traveling. Transparency is important to our program. And honestly, it saves us a lot of time because we put so much information on the website. I think it reduces the amount of phone calls we have for self-service. We do extensive outreach. The most effective outreach tool we have is a very long warning period. We have a 60-day warning period, and that allows regular users and less frequent users to travel through our photo enforcement programs. And it's the best way to reach people who will be affected by the program, because if you're likely to get a ticket in the future, you're also likely to have gotten a warning during the warning period. So we reach a ton of people with our warning period, and we see our violation rate drop to 10% in the first week and drop to that 1.5% by the end of the warning period. So really effective at getting people to change behavior and avoid receiving a fine after the program starts normal operations. All of our information is public facing. We're not coy about what that threshold is. You can look in our FAQ, that 6+ miles per hour, that's the violation. We're not trying to get people to calibrate their speedometers and try to figure out where that is. We want people to know how the program works and how to change their behavior to avoid violating the speed limit. That's the goal, to have people not violate the speed limit. All of our program is also safety motivated. We target areas where you have high opportunities for safety intervention. We make sure that all of our enforcement is safety positive. Speed enforcement is very safety positive. It's a trickier question with red light enforcement, bus lane enforcement, those sorts of things. We want to make sure that we're having a net safety impact with our enforcement, even if it's enforcement that serves operational goals such as blocking the intersection, which we don't have yet, but we're looking into it. And then all of our money goes back into safety. So this money doesn't return to the general fund. It all returns back to the streets in the form of keeping our roads safe, making new safety investments, and keeping our program operating. So our program started in school zones, and then we had the state law change to allow it to move out of school zones. I would still recommend that people start with school zones because we really benefited from having that smaller scale program. In our city, school zone periods capture about 10% of traffic. And when we switched to regulatory enforcement at those existing cameras, what that means is that we had our program scale up with no new infrastructure. We had our program scale up to 10 times the size. Now, the school zones will help you prevent that serious crash, that kid getting hurt. You never want to see that. But because we affect 10% of our traffic, that means doing school zone enforcement only is not really going to move the needle on crashes in the corridor. To move crashes in the corridor, expanding to that regulatory enforcement, that's what really saw us see lower speeds in the corridor all day long, affecting 100% of our drivers in that area. We still have a geographic limitation there of having made that investment into the school zones. Expanding outside of school zones is something that we're moving towards right now. This regulatory speed limit enforcement, we have about a year of that under our belts. And seeing that scale of our program, really the program scaling up shakes out all the bugs. So I think this is from a feasibility point of view, this was an important progression for us to have, to stress test our program with the school zone enforcement, expand that to capture a wider base of road users before we determined that we were ready to move outside of school zones, which is another thing that was enabled to us by state law recently with changes that were made last year. That said, because we do have a limited geographic area where those school zones are positioned, we're not seeing a dramatic change in the crash history. Crashes are still highly variable, and this is a small capture area. But we do see dramatic changes in speeds, and we expect that to shake out in the long-term crash history. And we expect wider citywide crash reduction to be a result of wider geographic enforcement. One of the things that is also really unique about school zones is when you have, especially time of day school zones, when you have a road that is designed for 30 miles per hour, you can't also design that for 20 miles per hour. So you're really limited on your toolbox for getting people to comply with that lower speed limit. You have fewer engineering interventions, and that's why photo enforcement is a critical tool for school zones. Outside of school zones, we have a much larger toolbox for getting that road to behave well at a certain speed using engineering interventions, but those tools aren't always financially feasible. So getting into our general area speed enforcement, we have to be a lot more careful with making sure that we're prioritizing engineering interventions when feasible and making sure that our community feels like we are not jumping to photo enforcement as a last resort. And the revenue is important for investing in those other non-enforcement improvements, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. When we scale up our program, we also see things that used to happen just once in a while happening every day. So people having the wrong address on file at their, with their vehicle registration, or our cameras being impacted by a frost that caused, condensation to form inside the device. Small time problems happen big time when we scale up our program. So again, having that program with a phased scaling was really important for us to work out the kinks. A few just rapid fire considerations when building a program is that the local laws, they vary and they're very tricky, and you definitely need your lawyer's help. The court relationship, the court will be processing all those violations. In our case, the court, we work with the district court. Some cities have a municipal court. They had to scale up staff to accommodate a larger scale program. The violation review happens by our police. It used to be that the violation happened in between time when they're waiting for a call, when they're sitting on the road doing other traffic enforcement. As we scale that up, it's moved into using overtime hours for police review. The accessory devices, the school zone flashers, the speed feedback signs, those have become more important than ever. If you ever want to find out if your school zone flasher is broken, have someone think they got a ticket because it was off. So we have really scaled up our attentiveness and our response time to these accessory devices. And they've become really important to the success of our program, and I credit them to having a violation rate as low as we do. Data collection. You can't collect data yesterday. If you want to help tell the story about why your program is needed, you need to start collecting data today. That's something that you can't go back in time and do. So if you think you might be interested in the program in the future, invest in your data collection today. And build your team. This is not something that just lives with engineering. It's a partnership with the police. It's a partnership with finance, city manager's office, our outreach and communications officer, our courts. This is a multidisciplinary program, and it can't live with just one department. So we design for safety, and the revenue comes anyway. An important point in knowing how you can spend that is knowing what your costs will be. We have two types of costs: variable costs, which boil out to a per ticket thing. 70% of our fines get paid. 30% of them end up either dismissed or in collections or non-payment of other means, reduced judgment for financial cause, that sort of thing. Off the top of each ticket that gets paid, we take off $3 for police review. That's a rate that we introduce when we use overtime cops. Sometimes we don't pay that $3. $5 for printing and mailing. That's a pass-through cost from our contractor. And $20 is the average cost of court fees. Very low costs if people just pay the ticket online. Higher costs if they request a mitigation hearing or a contested hearing. From that $110, we end up getting $50 remitted to the city for every ticket, ballpark. To figure out what kind of revenue our program is going to generate, you can take 1,000 ADT, multiply that by every day of the year, and take that 1% violation rate. And program-wide, we estimate about $180,000 per 1,000 ADT captured by our program. That 1% violation rate is highly variable, and I'm going to talk about that again in a second. After our variable costs, we have our fixed costs after we aggregate all of our remittance. And then we have to deduct out the program-wide costs. These are fixed. They scale with the program, but they're not going to change from year to year. When we take that $182,000, we multiply that by the ADT captured. We subtract out the camera fees. These are fixed fees. We pay them every year, about $50,000 per camera times 6 cameras. The operation and maintenance costs of our accessory devices. We have to keep those working to keep our program fair. And then, of course, program administration time. After that, the scale of our program is about a $3.2 million program, is what we estimated for 2025 revenue, and we're on track to hit that. So this estimation methodology has worked out pretty well for us. And I think it's something that if you get that information about your roads, it will help you estimate what kind of revenue you could expect from your program too. That violation rate does not stay the same every year. And when we plan our long-term financial solvency of the program, we plan for our long-term violation rate. So right here we have by month of activity, the violation rate of our cameras. We see a long-term trend, and about planning ridiculously far out at year 25, we're trending towards about a 0.2% violation rate. A lot can happen. Maybe we'll all have flying cars by then, but we wanted to be conservative with estimating how much revenue we need for the program to remain operating. When we look at that, we reserve all that revenue below 0.2%. We reserve that for our fixed expenses. Everything that comes in above that, all the revenue in excess of that 0.2% violation rate, that's what we have for our one-time surplus to invest in projects. This is money that we can't expect to have next year. It's going to drop off every year. And so we divide that revenue into stuff we can spend on projects and stuff that we can assume to budget for fixed costs year after year. The revenue is really important. There's a lot that goes into deciding what your violation fine is going to be. I really have a lot of concern about low and no revenue programs, because when that violation drops, your program may become insolvent. And if you want to lose public buy-in, the best way to do that is doubling your ticket cost because your program's going bankrupt. Lastly, if we have a successful low or no revenue program, we don't have any money to reinvest in safety. And that means that when all of those safety projects become financially infeasible, the only tool we can resort to is photo enforcement. So by having that money to reinvest in safety improvements and in speed management, non-enforcement-based speed management, that lets us not rely on photo enforcement. We can avoid the need for photo enforcement on other streets by using photo enforcement to invest in those streets before we get to the point where we need to put cameras on there. So no program fails because it provides too much safety, and no program fails because it makes too much money. If you want a sustainable program, the most safety that you can get and the most revenue that you can raise to invest in your safety is a program that lasts the longest. So it's that public buy-in that is super critical for building a photo enforcement program, starting in school zones, expanding it from school zones, building and maintaining that trust. That is the way to serve all the safety goals that you're trying to achieve with your photo enforcement program. And the only other thing I want to add is that if you're building a safety program, we're all in this together. Residents, drivers, they don't know where one city ends and where the next begins. An exploitative program that your neighbor has can affect how people support your program. I love talking about photo enforcement because I really want to be an advocate for responsible photo enforcement and using these high impact tools in a way that allows us to retain the permission to use these tools. So always happy to be a resource anytime. I hope this makes somebody want to start a photo enforcement or advocate for one in their city. I think we can move to questions, or I'll hand it back to Dan.
Great. Thanks so much, Tobin. We appreciate your presentation as well as the others. We're going to jump into our Q&A period. We got some really good questions from you all. And please keep them coming if you think of new ones. We'll try to capture as many as we can, and I'll invite our panelists back to join us for this. So one I think factor that you all mentioned as being really important for kind of making the case for safety improvements in school zones is simply, we're protecting children, we're protecting families, caregivers, people traveling in the school zone. And there's some questions about, how often we see, or you all potentially see crashes happening, perhaps in school zones, but sort of unrelated to the school travel. Could be, late at night, somebody coming to and from work. Doesn't really have to do necessarily with the school being there, but maybe it does. But how do you fold that into your argument for better safety improvements in schools? Is are you focusing in primarily on the safety of the student, the parent, the school travel, or are you being more expansive in how you define the role that the school street plays in overall community safety? Maybe Christine, we can start with you and then broaden it out from there.
Sure. Yeah. I know when we started pulling the data at the very beginning of our school zones project, there weren't many crashes that happened like within the specific arrival dismissal periods, which is great. But then we're like, well, what does it look like when you kind of look all day, every day? And that is where you see more patterns, especially since in our case, a lot of schools are next to a community center and there might be a lot of traffic going to and from the community center at different times of day. Or other, school people coming to schools for sports and after school things. So that was how we landed on making the school slow zones 20 mph all day, every day, because we knew that a lot of the problems are happening just beyond those key arrival and dismissal hours.
Yeah, I would say so. Before we started our photo enforcement program in Kenmore, and you can see it in the speed data on one of those early slides, is we saw people treating school zones just like any other piece of road. We saw that their travel behavior, their speeding behavior wasn't changing because they were entering a school zone. And that would bear out in our crash data too, that we would see that the active hours of the school zone would not be a factor in when crashes occur. So our all-day crash rate would follow the same pattern that other non-school zone areas would follow. Which is generally they happen during commuting hours where you'll see maybe more crashes but lower severity because speeds are naturally lower in a congested condition, and those line up with school, release and or drop off more so. And so the real effort here is to get school zones to behave differently, and to have school zones be a factor that reduces crash risk, so that we don't see those normal road use crashes happening at a time when we're just funneling all these vulnerable road users, into a shared traffic environment. But the other thing, and I think Christine was touching on this, is like the schools, they're centers of our community. Even when it's summer break, even when it's the weekend, the afternoon, schools are parks, schools are on walk routes to other places, schools are in neighborhoods. We use these areas, we use these traffic environments, whether the school is active or not. So supporting school zone safety also supports the travel for all those other, community travel generators.
Thank you. I wanted to shift a bit to kind of the engagement with the school teachers and parents themselves. A lot of us here on this webinar, I think even by the numbers I crunched it, a lot of us are state or local transportation professionals, planners, engineers, and the school districts, the teachers, the administrators, and the parents may be an audience or a partner who are folks we don't work with as often. And so I wanted to ask maybe each of you separately a bit, maybe starting with Tobin, about engaging with the school partners on camera programs and coming to them with these ideas about photo enforcement in the school zone. Do you do that differently because it's an audience that may be less familiar with, why are we doing this? Or some comments about teachers and administrators may change over time and you may lose that institutional partnership or knowledge about why the program exists? Are you finding that that's a tough relationship to build or maintain over time? Or maybe you figured it out.
Our schools have been very supportive of safety investment and anything from physical devices to photo enforcement. The struggle with that relationship has been the folks who work with the schools are already spread so thin. And it's been difficult to maintain that connectivity. It's gotten a lot better. That's something photo enforcement has really been what brought us together, because they're also a huge outreach partner. The people traveling through those school zones when we're doing only school zone enforcement, very important to parents who are driving as well as walking. And we also have photo enforcement at a high school. So that's a great opportunity for education. Right as soon as they leave driver's ed class, they get an opportunity to drive the speed limit. So it's really been something that has helped us build that relationship, that has helped us in other conversations as well, because now we know each other. I will say one of the things, it sometimes almost feels like I need to have a kid enrolled in each school just to get the updates about the belt times, because they change by 5 minutes every year. And that's something that we never had that sensitivity to before we had this close partnership with the school about how often the days off will change because the teacher's contract got renegotiated. So actually, our quality of investment and our diligence in keeping those the school zone flashers timed correctly and on the correct days and off on the correct days, like that's improved too, because the stakes are higher now that we have photo enforcement, and we're much more diligent, both sides, about keeping that schedule matching what the school's doing.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And Christine, I'd ask that question to you maybe in the context of your work, especially, developing the guidelines for school zones, and, to what degree do the teachers, parents, administrators get engaged in that process? Oh, I'm sorry. I just noticed you're on mute, Christine, at least to me.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when we first sat down with the schools, in a lot of cases they were like, oh, we haven't really talked with anybody in transportation before. So it was great to establish a connection with them, and then also hear about other kind of issues they were experiencing. So I think just kind of taking that first step and developing the guidelines brought in a lot of interest. And we heard a lot of different types of stories from the different schools, which just kind of showed everybody has a very unique little transportation ecosystem at their school. And we were able to help with lots of questions. And kind of like Tobin said, we've worked really hard ever since we launched our photo speed program to make sure that all of our beacons are timed right. There's so many little nuances and, things that weren't super important, or they weren't, like as top of mind as they are now. So I think it just helped to create the relationships, and then also gave them a point of contact. So now, I've stayed connected to a lot of these teachers who we've gone and done, assemblies with some schools because they've had a very specific transportation interest. So even though it might not directly relate to the guidelines or to, how the school zone is, it just has given them a relationship with the county so we can support them however they might need for their school.
And Nancy, the same question to you. Someone specifically asked about how you showed the graph earlier about why are you doing these walk and bike to school, walk and bike and enroll to school programs, and asking you just, what motivates, principals, administrators, teachers, parents to really get behind these things.
Yeah, sometimes it is because they recognize that there are safety risks and they want to be able to shine a light on safety problems and try to rally support around that. Sometimes it is because they see the benefits of walking and biking. There's good evidence now about the value of physical activity and its relationship with academic achievement and ability to focus during the school day. Those are things that schools care about. They care about having students arrive on time and ready to learn. So they are also then interested in not having a lot of congestion in their pickup and drop off zones. So if they have ways that they can encourage using a variety of modes to arrive to school, then that's something that is compelling for them. I also just am thinking about City of Minneapolis and the fact that their Safe Routes to School program has a school district coordinator and a city Safe Routes to School coordinator. So really what you see there is this work hand in hand and understanding, hey, we're trying to increase pedestrian and bicycle safety skills among students within the school setting. We are promoting it by using huge walking and biking events, as well as walking and biking field trips. So they're trying to set this culture and change norms around how young people think about moving around their community. That is very importantly complemented by changes in infrastructure in school zones and beyond, so that students feel like they have welcoming, safe places to walk and bike.
Those are really good points. We got a question. I think I'm going to ask Christine to weigh in on this one first. A question about how, if at all, you're incorporating or addressing the use of e-bikes and e-scooters by students, I suppose by parents as well, because parents are dropping their kids off on e-bikes, in your school zone guidelines or the ways that you're designing streets in your schools. Does that play a factor? People are asking about speed differentials, for example. Do you have anything that you're doing on that topic?
There isn't a specific element in the guidelines per se about, specific types of bike or scooter devices. We have seen a big uptick in Arlington. I know there are a lot of young kids on e-bikes who are not of the legal age. So we did do a big partnership across multiple departments to campaign about kind of the age limit restrictions, because we saw lots of, middle schoolers, many per device, and we did see some of it in our crash data. So we are really working hard to share that message and help kind of get them on other devices. We have a iRide program where the kids can ride the school bus for free. So trying to provide other options and alternatives where they might not be of legal age to use the shared devices. But we are trying to make things as safe as possible for all people on bikes. So, we don't want to discourage the use of bikes. There's lots of, parents driving, their smaller kids on e-bikes. We'd love to see that. So all in all, trying to make the zone safer for people on bikes, no matter what kind, and scooters as well, but then also trying to promote the safe practice, the age restrictions, and just kind of education all around on that kind of new mobility option that we have available.
Sure. Any other comments from anyone about e-bikes or e-scooters before we move off that topic? I know it's of interest to a lot of folks. Maybe not.
Just to reiterate that it's a very difficult problem, and we do see it in our region too. Young kids on e-bikes, and it's not something that we feel like we can solve with engineering intervention, which is my department. It's something that we work on with the police for advocacy, education. I think right now you have to be 16 to use a Type 3 e-bike. I think kids use them anyway. We see kids crashing into parked cars on e-bikes. It's there's such an important mobility tool, and I'm really excited to see their use grow. But this is definitely, the dark side of the growth of e-bikes is seeing more and more, very young kids on motorized devices.
I see. Yeah. Another topic for another day. We can probably cover that in more depth. I wanted to shift. This is another, mode outside of the standard, walking and biking within the school zone. And that's comments coming in a lot of places where maybe they're smaller towns, more rural places. They don't have this volume of walking and biking to school that we're seeing in some communities. And often what they're seeing a lot is looking at the safety of kids riding buses. And it's a bit outside the scope of our work here today, but I wonder to what degree within the realm of improving the safety of students traveling to and from school, we can think about children getting on and off the bus, whether that is, specific programs. I know photo enforcement has extended to school bus stop arms. So I don't know if you all have experience with any of that. Are you looking at bus rider safety in the realm of your Safe Routes to School programs? And I'm sorry, I'm not specifying any one person to start with that one.
I can chime in on that, Dan. And we've done a little bit of work looking at school bus stop placement and the importance of that, as well as the connection that students make, like what is their walking route to their bus stop, and then where are they standing, and is there sufficient space? I mean, from kind of a design perspective, then really thinking about where are those school bus stops located? Is there sufficient space for students to stand, off the roadway, particularly because we are seeing a growth of kind of consolidated school bus stops. So you can have a stop that has, 20 kids standing at it. So, how are we planning for where those are going and really trying to balance that with what I know, school transportation folks are also thinking about, which is efficiency. They have a lot of students that they're trying to move to multiple schools and use it and sort of needing to do that in a really efficient way. So how do you balance that with safety, right? Because if that means that you're putting a school bus stop, on a high volume, high speed roadway, it might be safer for students if it were off the road, on a side, residential street, but then maybe that's going to slow down the overall routing. Those are things that need to be kind of properly balanced.
Great
Yeah,
points.
we definitely do the hub stops, and I know the considerations are, is there enough space available? We try to make sure that they are in locations too. A lot of them are in school zones. It'll be kind of near a different school where there's other kids walking. So it works out really nicely. And we did have a school bus stop arm program that was discontinued, I think a little before 2020, for a few reasons, but we're working to try to relaunch it again because that is a great way to, make sure people comply.
Sure. I've got a question queued up about speed bumps and speed humps for Christine, and then we can expand from that. They're asking when you're deciding on implementing speed humps, what kind of factors weigh in from the emergency responder perspective? That is probably a typical question. I know we often get questions about winter maintenance and speed bumps. Can you speak a bit, maybe generally, about speed bump location selection and placement and the considerations that maybe go into that?
Sure. Yeah, we were focusing on the local streets, so it was our school slow zones, and we collected data to see which locations were having the higher or lower compliance, and then place the speed humps where we saw the highest rates of speeding. So that was a great way to kind of support it. It was a hard sell with our EMS because they didn't want to see the change. We did reiterate, hey, it's a pilot, it's a temporary material, so that did get some buy-in. And I actually said in the chat, we are piloting some tactical speed cushions to see if that might be a great middle ground for us. We're going to collect before and after data and see if they're as effective for the personal vehicles, if they have that same speed reduction benefit. So that might be a great tool in our toolbox moving forward, is to do the speed cushions as a kind of way to balance the two. And we also heard from bike riders, some of the smaller bike riders in the community had trouble getting up the speed hump because it's pretty rigid. So we're trying to balance that. And also we did find that if we placed any kind of vertical device near them, it was better for our plows. So they knew to lift up as they went over the speed hump, because there wasn't really seeing the speed hump sign it's not different from any other speed hump. So some kind of bollard or something was really good for them to preserve them, so we didn't have to go back and replace them all after winter.
Yeah. Tobin and Kenmore, a lot of any speed hump approaches that you are using?
So we're shifting really towards speed cushions as well, and they're really ITE has gotten really behind speed cushions, and we use the ITE vertical deflection manual for design of those and spacing and warranting. And they offer advantages, for EMS, of course. They're also a lot simpler for drainage. So there's a lot going for speed cushions. And, they also, provide that path for, other modes for bicycles to get through, that sort of thing. We haven't gotten far enough that we have, before and after data on speed cushions, but the resources we've looked at show them to be very nearly as effective as speed humps. Maybe just different by single digits percentage and speed reduction. So we're excited to move forward with that option, and it's where we're going right now.
Excellent. I want to stay with you, Tobin, for a moment and ask. There's a specific question here about whether you've done analysis on the effects of your speed camera programs on speeding in areas that are not monitored or enforced by speed cameras. And the person asking the question is maybe presuming that roadway users are trying to make up their speed elsewhere, maybe speeding more on other corridors. I feel like I've seen some research on halo effects where there are actually speed reductions even in locations that are not actively monitored or enforced. And I wonder what your experience has been in Kenmore.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. No, I'd love to talk about that. It's so what we saw actually is really exciting, which is because our standard treatment for this photo enforcement area is to pair it with those speed feedback signs to allow you self-correct your speed on the way in.
Mhm.
What we've seen, I'm going to call it a Pavlovian effect, but we've seen speed reductions at long established speed feedback signs elsewhere in the city, not as dramatic as having photo enforcement, but still, 2, 3, 4 mile per hour drops, really more than anything I've ever seen in my career without installing additional, engineering interventions. So we've seen the synergy between these accessory devices we're using and how people respond to those roadside devices elsewhere in the city. Insofar as outside of the areas with accessory devices, nothing has popped up more than normal variation right now. It might take more years to, really get a sensitive analysis on that, but we haven't seen anything extreme. So if there is an effect, people speeding up afterwards, then I think it's relatively minor and it's not showing up in our network screening and our other speed data. And we do a lot of data collection, but really very excited about seeing our photo enforcement increase the effectiveness of our speed management roadside devices elsewhere in the city. That was really exciting to see. And other
I
school
think,
zones too, also as
yeah.
well.
I think that's a perfect illustration of sort of the overall topic we're here to discuss is, how we can start in school zones and make bigger impact
Mhm.
community wide. And I wanted to offer Christina, Christine, if you have an example of work in Arlington that's really started in school zones and had that spillover effect or expanded benefit across the community.
Well, we're hoping we do that with speed humps, kind of
Yeah.
do it kind of starting in school zones and build out. And I mean, same thing for our speed camera program. Right now, that's what we're allowed to under law. But we're hoping that we get the data to kind of tell the story of how it's improved safety. And I would love to see it on, our Hindtree network corridors and be able to expand. But like I said, quick build projects, that's something that we've been able to do kind of everywhere. And, the more support we get for things like, school zone improvements, the more support we get for other things. Because right now we're actually updating our Vision Zero action plan. And one of the engagement activities we have is like, here's all the different stuff we do, put a dot near what you see. And I think every time school zone gets like the highest check. So then they're kind of like, oh, you're the ones doing the school zones. That's great. We'd love to see this in other places. So it's kind of that spillover effect just for kind of Vision Zero support overall,
Right.
which is great.
Well, I wanted to close out the discussion by asking you both to share if you can think of one thing that you feel like you could do with your school zone safety programs that would really level them up, that you kind of see as an opportunity in the near term to make even bit better safety gains or expand that across the community. Could you think of a particular thing? And I wonder if that's top of mind for you now, Christine, with your Vision Zero action plan coming up. Maybe you have a lot of ideas on the table that you might consider, but you see some of those opportunities where you could really take it to the next level.
I think we would love to be able to unlock the communication, mystery, because I think we've really been able to make so many big strides in infrastructure. But I think a lot of change that we need to see also stems from kind of behavior. And as much as we try to reach out to school, like the school communities, the parents, the students, I think that is our biggest struggling point. So it would be great to build the relationship, not only with the schools and the staff, but also be able to kind of work more with the community. So we have, more direct back and forth on like ideas, needs, and to get to that behavior change level that we want to see going forward to help us get to Vision Zero by 2030.
Excellent. Thank you. Tobin, do you have any ideas, your wish list?
Yeah, the communication note really resonates with me. There's so much misinformation out there about photo enforcement programs generally and ours specifically, both of that. And I'm really excited to see. So we were an early adopter with the new laws for expanding photo enforcement authority. that came out last year, and we're seeing that being picked up by other cities in the region and in the state. And what I'm really excited about is to have more cities on this journey too, and to normalize it and to start to see that change in safety culture, to start to see people be more attentive to traffic laws and speed limits. And we are seeing that. Someone told me that they said, oh, my boyfriend got a ticket in a school zone and now he pays attention to other signs too. So I think it's making people more attentive drivers, and I really want to see that bear fruit. And I think the way it's going to bear fruit is not if this program lives and dies in Kenmore, but if it becomes something that has a wider reach than just one city. So I'd really like to see, is that a cop out if I just want other cities to level up?
No, that's great. You're putting it all back on us. So that's
Yeah.
a nice call to action to complete our discussion today.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. We just reached the end of the webinar. I really appreciate you all coming to join this discussion with us today. Hopefully, learning something and bringing some knowledge to us. And we especially want to thank Tobin and Christine and Nancy Pullen-Sufert for their contributions today. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from me. I'll send you all the webinar details where you can find the recording, the post-webinar questions, and your certificate of attendance. That should be coming to you tomorrow. And until then, we hope you keep an eye on us. We'll see you at our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.